me, we're going to be out here as long as it takes to see change in this country. And I told him, you're going to be here a while.
Occupy Wall Street is a movement where we elevate ourselves, the people of the world, as equals in power with the 1%.
The top 1% have experienced dramatic income gains over the last 30 years. Most Americans have not.
It's not about greed, it's about the sense of unfairness.
There are a lot of people that want to work and they just can't find the jobs.
I'm $45,000 in debt at 20 years old.
Their debt is unpayable.
The entire world is fed up with the huge disparity of wealth caused by the present system.
It used to be one man equals one vote. Now it's $1 equals one vote.
Corporations are people, my friend. Of course they are.
We need to separate money from politics, taking back the power of the electoral process.
We have a fearful government.
They consider Occupy to be verging on a domestic terrorist threat.
The American dream has turned into a broken promise.
People wake up.
What can we do to restore security for people who are willing to work hard in this country?
They inspired me so much by their conviction that I made a very quick decision that I have to be arrested with them.
The Occupy movement is about giving people a voice.
This is the proudest I've ever been to be an American in my life.
It feels like something's finally being done.
He walked out in the gray light and stood, and he saw for a brief moment the absolute truth of the world. The cold, relentless circling of the intestate earth. Darkness implacable. The blind dogs of the sun in their running. The crushing black vacuum of the universe. And somewhere 200 animals trembling like ground foxes in their cover. Borrowed time and borrowed world and borrowed eyes with which to sorrow it.
And lo, for the earth was empty of form, and void, and darkness was all over the face of the deep, and we said, look at that fucker dance.
Welcome to Heat Death of the Universe, a podcast pitching tents, implementing human microphones / community kitchen-based tactics, while squirming under waterfalls of milk and pepper spray alike, and kettling and tear-gassing the uppity masses every chance it gets. It is 10:51 a.m., April 13th, Korea Standard Time, year of our Lord, 0.1%, 2024. Josh here, Tim over there. Mic check. Tim. How's it going?
Yo. How's it going? Michael, check.
What's going on? I was going to keep doing that, but it's too annoying. Yeah.
Is that a ventriloquist? Are you throwing your voice?
Like a mic check, man. Fucking mic check. Did you not
I don't know. What is this? Is it a reference to something?
Way they communicated at Occupy constantly.
Oh, yes. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, yes. I completely forgot. The human microphone.
Yeah, the human microphone, right.
Yes, I forgot that. I forgot all about that.
Let's for audio listeners only, because that's your only way to listen. We are up twinkling. We are using jazz fingers to show our approval. Yes. Tim over there in Hollywood land, California's gold. How's it going? What's up, Tim?
Yeah, that's what they call me, California's gold. Speaking of another part of California's gold, we lost a very important one in the pantheon of valiant and great Californians.
Smooth.
Orenthal James Simpson.
Smooth segue. I like that. Indeed, this is true. This is breaking news, breaking chews, if you will. Yeah, I don't know. What's there to say about OJ being dead? I mean, all I really found was I don't know if I put it on here. It was on our Discord chat. I was just looking at Twitter, like seeing if anything interesting came about Twitter. Of course, a lot of it is just like, oh, can you believe this was OJ's last tweet? And it's like very obviously fake.
It's pretty good.
It just says, I did that shit. But then I found like what maybe legitimately one of his last tweets was a video of him being like, I think, did you see that? Like the
I retweeted that
one
just a few moments ago. Yeah, Hospice. Who said I was in
What
Hospice?
you talking about Hospice? And that's I mean, that's another thing with I mean, I just, there's like a million articles, of course, just like the legacy of OJ, blah, blah, blah. And one of them was like the real legacy of OJ. I think it was Slate. I mean, I barely started reading it, but I got the gist. It was like, sure, black people cheered when he was found not guilty, but white people really loved OJ, and just going into the racial politics of OJ, I guess, like, which is true. There's like, there's this whole thing with OJ, like essentially kind of like trying to be white his whole life, and like quite successfully in a way.
Well, I don't want to get out the calipers here, but I don't know if he ever succeeded in becoming transracial.
Well, in the cultural sense, which I think you talked about recently, your own self.
Yes. Yeah.
But there's, I guess I'll just say, and this will be, I'll say this is maybe one of my, or two of my general recommendations for this week. There's, I think I brought this up on, I think this was on Boomer Death Squad, not this podcast. Yeah, it was on their podcast. Or no, I don't know. I think I ended up releasing it. Anyway, whatever. We talked about the that show, the impeachment show, the American Crime Story impeachment edition, where they dramatized the Lewinsky scandal. Clive Owen played Bill Clinton. It was great. Yeah. That's actually on our feed. I'll put it in the show description if anyone cares. It's
okay, good.
But we reviewed the first episode, and two of the three BDS boys didn't show up to their own podcast recording, so we just ended up releasing it on our feed for some reason. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But it was a collab between.
I don't know. People like backstage dirt. Give the goss. Why didn't they come?
I mean, they were just
what were they
busy or something. That's not. There's no real dirt. That's why I'm cutting myself off, because it's not interesting. It's just like, then I sent an email to Danny, and then Danny said to me, maybe this. And yeah, it's that. That's very exciting backstage gossip. But
I like that.
Anyway, this is all a roundabout way of saying that on that episode, I strongly recommended, which I will strongly recommend again, in light of OJ's passing. There was that 5-part docuseries, the 30 for 30 docuseries about OJ. I think it won an Academy Award. It was really well done, though. I've watched it more. I think I've watched it twice over the years. It's long. It's 5 parts, so probably about 5 hours. But yeah, it just goes into like his whole story essentially, including the murder trial and all that, and the I think it gets into the how he broke it, or he had people break in to someone's hotel or whatever and steal back a bunch of his merchandise because he was like running out of money, and that's what he ended up actually going to jail for. But anyway, so there's that, and then also the American Crime Story connection is that the first season of that show was focused on the OJ Simpson murder trial, called The People versus OJ Simpson. It was also really good. John Travolta as Robert Shapiro. I remember that being weird, compelling. The worst choice really was like getting Cuba Gooding Jr. to play OJ. Although I can't think of like a better like I don't know, mainstream actor
that was
play that like looks more like OJ, but
sure.
Like he didn't have the OJ vibe, but it didn't really matter because it was really, the show was more about all the stuff surrounding him. So
I think that is the one that has David Schwimmer as Kardashian,
yes.
Right? Yes, I did watch that, I think. And I agree with you about Cuba Gooding Jr. He does feel like the perfect guy to play OJ in a lot of ways.
In some ways, yeah,
but he did not pull it off there at all.
Ultimately, doesn't work.
Yeah, and I don't know who would be the right guy. Who would be the right person to?
I'm sure there are other actors that could like
maybe
capture sort of the essence better, but that just like OJ's such a very like uniquely like
right.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone else like who I've been like, oh, that kind of looks like OJ. Like he's a very unique looking person in a way.
The one that crossed my mind is Denzel Washington's son.
Nah, I see. I don't know. I don't see it. No,
you don't think so?
To get real calibers with it, he's just not. He's not light skinned enough.
Well, no, I just mean he's like. I think he could pull off the acting. I don't even necessarily. I think that's the tough part about it. Right? Is that like people are going to just think about OJ the real guy when they watch it, but I'm just saying like someone who could pull off the
disappear
role. And I think you might be overblowing just how light-skinned OJ really is, or was, I guess. I think he comes across more light-skinned than he actually was because of his politics, as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. I mean, I'm just thinking of like...
Hey, get out the paper bag. Let's check this
Thinking of all the different pictures I've seen of him over the years, and I'm sure it fluctuates or something.
Wow. The thing about it too is that the bright lights of a mugshot does wash you out, so he's going to look lighter. Have he was, because actually OJ was, there was like the controversy with the People magazine thing or whatever, the magazine cover thing. Do you remember this?
No.
There was like a controversy that when OJ was OJ and he was popular, he was on the cover of People magazine and he was light, and then when he was a criminal, there was a cover of People magazine that he was on and they clearly intentionally darkened him. Like, so they were actually like same guy. They did some colorism with him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, it's coming back to me. That's probably in that like long documentary. Or yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, I'm just looking at pictures of John David Washington, Denzel's son. A lot of people have kind of been shitting on him as an actor. Like, I thought he was fine, but then, like, after I saw some criticisms of him, I started thinking back to the stuff I've seen him in, and I was like, I don't know, is he a good actor? Is it sort of a positive bias towards him because his dad is such a good actor? Like, he seems kind of stilted in some ways. Although, no, then I have to go back and remember what he's actually been in. He was really good in BlacKkKlansman. He was really fucking good in that.
I would say that the stilted nature of him is kind of what lent me to the idea that, like I said, I think he could pull off.
Yeah.
Because OJ, as you talked about, he's a little, off. Because he was trying to kind of be in between cultures in a way. I think that he was not.
I just remembered where this all started from. Me thinking about the way he was pronouncing hospice in that final in the final tweet or whatever. It was the thing of where he would it's the same. I mean, it's the same shit a lot of people do, right? Like out of a certain sort of necessity, like what code switching. But like it sort of reminds me of like the phony, like the really transparently phony way that like people like Obama would do it. This is like kind of the awkward way that OJ would do it. It's like, oh, suddenly I gotta appear blacker, so I'll just like throw in a little stank on a few words here and there.
Sure.
Like the word hospice. Hospice? What you talking hospice? Anyway,
right.
We're not here really to talk OJ or hospice or John David Washington. But...
Well, in a lot of ways, I mean, the OJ Simpson verdict, the subsequent LA riots after, a lot of that was,
that was separate, man.
I know, but I'm just saying these things are all related into the milieu of kind of bubbling under the surface of social unrest in America that led to the bigger.
I'll never forget
the point of the episode
was pronounced not guilty, and then some white cops went back in time to beat the shit out of Rodney King. It was a whole Back to the Future nightmare.
It was.
But yes, you're right. We can connect the dots here. Occupy Wall Street, everybody. Remember that? Remember that thing? I did recently, after probably long periods of not really ever thinking about it. I think it just like came up organically on our last episode, and that's where the idea to do this came from. Also, I remembered when I first started the podcast, I remember getting the idea that it could be a good like single topic episode to talk about like Occupy Wall Street, and like at the time, like the 10th anniversary of it was still like a year away. But then just forgot about that shit. And so here we are in 2024. Not even close to any sort of anniversary of it, but whatever, who cares? We talk about what we want to talk about when we want to talk about it. Human microphone style.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you did any occupying yourself. Did you occupy at all?
No.
Because I think we're both at the age range where it was possible for us.
For a decent chunk of its continuation, I was out of the country. So this happened like right before, like it all kind of broke out like right before I moved to Korea, essentially. But no, I was like. So yeah, I mean, I remember I can remember exactly where I was when I first heard about it happening, and I like heard about it through the radio while I was driving a work truck. I had this shitty job at the time, driving auto paint supplies around, and I did a lot of. We've talked about this before. I had a period where I listened to Tom Hartman a lot, the radio personality.
I had a period of that too.
Yeah,
I remember that.
You and I talked about it a little bit before, and how he used to have Bernie on every week.
Yeah,
but I think it was his show
and Robot Chickens in the Sky. He'd play the Robot Chickens in the Sky song.
What?
Do you remember the Robot Chickens in the Sky? He would play that song for a certain. He would have like a segment every month, probably, where he would tell some weird story about birds and things.
I do not recall this at all. He always seemed like way more like sort of buttoned down and serious to me. He wasn't really very funny or trying to be.
He presented very serious, yeah, but I don't know if you ever read any of his books.
I started reading one of them, the one about like corporate personhood or whatever, but I didn't finish it.
Oh, not like that, like, because he would do like fiction.
Oh,
books
I had no idea.
Or like,
Tom Hartman, expert.
Yeah, he wrote. Yeah, well, I mean, we both kind of talked about it. He did like, maybe it was like historical fiction, kind of whatever kind of stuff. But he did things other than like straight, just like political information type stuff. He had a bit of a sense of humor, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Yeah, I didn't realize what a prolific author he was. I'm looking now.
Yeah, man. He's like Zizek. He wrote a ton of books.
So yeah, there was like one radio station in the like Chicago region that like, was had progressive lib. I mean, it was like, hey, you want something slightly to the left of NPR? Turn the dial a little bit this way. Hey, turn the dial literally left. It would have been from NPR.
Yeah, turn it to the left.
So I used to.
Did you guys have Air America, or as I used to call it, Queer America, because it was for queers?
I always thought that was like a.
I
always thought that was a like a satellite radio or something. Was that terrestrial radio?
It was terrestrial.
I never listened to it there, but I think I like wasn't Mark Maron on there at one point? He was just rants about politics, like sort of, right?
Yeah.
Him and Sam Cedar were buddies and shit. Yeah,
they did a web show together.
I vaguely remember seeing like early days of YouTube type like clips of them and stuff, maybe, but
yeah, I don't remember where it was, but I heard some podcast or some person, they were like looking up just random radio hosts, radio stations, radio something, and then they came across Lionel, who was like an Air America host, and they were like they were just having so much fun laughing and joking about like a radio host whose name was just Lionel and that's all it said. Like he was one of those, he'd like to do that. I forget what they call it. The thing where it's like one name, like Cher or Madonna or whatever. There's a word for that, right? What is it? Mono something?
There is.
Anyways,
word for that, I'm sure. Yeah.
But yeah, they were just laughing about Lionel. Oh, Lionel, ha ha ha. He was a fucking complete. He ended up being a piece of shit grifter who was on Air America just for the money and didn't actually have like truly left politics. But whatever, doesn't matter. This is not the Lionel Radio Hour.
Mononym, or as an adjective, mononymous, which leads us back into our topic at hand, Occupy Wall Street. Anonymous.
Yeah, and anonymous.
So yeah, I remember like being really into it. I was into Occupy Wall Street as it was unfolding, and I was like following it closely via listening to the radio basically like 8 hours a day, because most of my day was just spent like driving around. And then of course online on Facebook. This was back in the day when I think I was only a slave to a single social media feed, which was still at the time the very unhip now Facebook. But back in 2011, it was still acceptable to be under 65 and use Facebook, if I'm remembering right. I mean, it was like it was teetering on that edge.
It was pushing it a little, but yeah, all right, I'll give it to you.
I'm just saying what I saw. There were a lot of a lot of the people that like would go on to be like too cool for fucking school were still. I guarantee you, every member of Chapo still was using their Facebook account in 2011.
All right, well, I'm gonna check this out. I'm gonna do some real research. No.
But anyway, the getting really lost in the weeds here. Like, your question was, did I occupy? No, I never went and joined any protest. The only time I ever really did go to a protest, I mean, this was around the same time, I think, as Occupy, but it wasn't connected really, because I think it was actually a little bit before. There were a huge series of protests in Wisconsin, in Madison at the Capitol. That's the word, the Capitol building, the state Capitol building, because the shitty howdy doody looking ventriloquist dummy governor, whose name now escapes me. He was basically preventing collective bargaining rights for teachers' unions in Wisconsin, and people weren't going to take it anymore, essentially, and invaded the Capitol building and surrounded it. And I went there once for one day, and it took me a little while because I was still very much even though I believed in the cause and whatnot, it was really hard for me to set aside my own whatever self-conscious ego shit and do chanting and things like that. I remember feeling I just felt like it was naked when I was actually at one point yelling along with a group of people things like, this is what democracy looks like and shit. And I still can barely even describe this event that happened 15 years ago or whatever without sort of blushing. But anyway, that was my, I guess, sort of just personal take on Occupy at the time. I was very much all for it. But yeah, how about you? Did you get in there? Did you have some sign waving?
I did. I went to Occupy stuff in Los Angeles. Whatever. It wasn't I was not fully committed to it or whatever. I wasn't one of the people who spent days, occupying or whatever. Out. No, but I went and, supported. I've, historically liked to do a lot of stuff along those lines. That was kind of it. Nothing too big. It was not a huge thing to me. It wasn't forming for the rest. I guess I didn't realize how much it was going to be impactful and form stuff on the rest of my life, but in a weird way it did. But we'll talk about that as we go through. But more in a big picture, in the same way that it basically affected everyone's life moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the. So. Where were we before I so rudely interrupted myself?
Just kind of getting into it, basically.
Think we were hemming and hawing and getting into.
Yeah. Right? Just get into what your plan was for the main thing, because we were just finishing up the both of our history with being involved in Occupy.
Right. I mean, for those who don't know, Occupy Wall Street was a big series of protests started in 2011. I guess officially the first day is you can pin it down to September 17th. But it kind of, there were more sort of just organic. I hate using that word, whatever. Organic, expressions of sort of discontent with Lady America at the time. And I mean, I guess a lot of it you could say came out of the housing crisis and the lingering effects of the big financial crash in 2007/8-ish. You may know about that if you're much younger than me, from an Adam McKay movie or some shit. Anyway, I lived that. That was my life. But no, I guess one important thing is that the Canadian, what would we call them? Culture jammers at Adbusters, which is its own, like, you know, we could do probably a whole separate podcast on Adbusters itself, but Occupy Wall Street was kind of a natural outgrowth of what Adbusters was doing, and Adbusters' whole thing is like they're more concerned with, like, you know, anti-consumerism, right? That's their deal, which, you know, some more staunchly sort of leftist folks, you know, criticize as being missing the point, you know, maybe not getting at the fundamental ills of capitalism. But I don't know. So because other people might look at something like Adbusters and see, like, you know, this is as far left as it gets. But I mean, much like with Occupy, I enjoyed Adbusters, like, in the years leading up to the Occupy movement. I never personally, like, subscribed or bought them because they were fucking expensive, these physical magazines. But I remember my girlfriend's cool older sister had, like, stacks of them in her apartment, and I would, like, read them a lot when we hung out over there. That's kind of the most I remember reading them. But they were like aesthetically pleasing. They just like looked cool, and then had, like, you know, kind of like long poetical rants in them. Is my memory of it. Not like necessarily quote unquote serious journalism or anything, but I may be misrepresenting them a little bit. I don't know. I mean, what's your memory of Adbusters? Yeah,
I mean, basically a lot of the same thing that you're saying there. A lot of stuff that's a little bit goofy, but, you know, at the same time, it's kind of, I don't know. It feels very like Gen X. You know what I mean? Like, in a way that's, like, kind of trying to be, how do I put it? Trying to be, like, sarcastic or whatever, but just kind of missing the mark, like I said, in a way that then comes across as too earnest, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like you give away the game too much by trying so hard to be, like, sarcastic or mocking something, that you give away how important and how much it actually affects you.
I also feel like there's some sort of, if not like official or financial or whatever overlap, but like spiritual overlap with Adbusters and, say, Vice. Maybe I'm thinking that just because they're both right. Canadian, but I feel like some of the people that worked for Adbusters probably worked at Vice and vice versa.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and one of the things I was looking into, and maybe it was a little bit more conspiratorial minded, it did kind of mention was it Cal Lasson, the founder of Adbusters magazine, and kind of him being the you know, again, one of the spiritual, you know, progenitors of the Occupy movement and everything. That, like, he may have had some kind of ties to the larger, like, Russian kind of infiltration of the entire movement. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I don't know about that specifically, but yeah, I found something by, I think it was like a guy who ended up being like a fairly influential, maybe chief editor or something at Adbusters, Micah White. Yeah. And he wrote an article in The Guardian saying that, I can't remember if he said he was literally approached by, it was basically saying like, he was talking about this idea of Russian infiltration into the movement, quote unquote. And that, I don't know, but he was also saying that like, he felt like he was being like essentially approached by or sort of spied on by the FBI as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the thing, like, somewhat, like I said, conspiracy leaning kind of coverage of it. And they, talk about RT and they talk about Russia. And even like, I heard some stuff connecting like, what then like comes out from WikiLeaks and all of that, and all of that being related. But it's like that, referencing that and talking about it only in the context of Russia is, I feel, unfair because, of course, like the American government was involved as well in infiltrating and, destabilizing and even just surveilling,
Yeah. And that's, I was reading this article very skeptically, actually, because it's, like the title of it in The Guardian is, I started Occupy Wall Street. Russia tried to co-opt me. But then you get into the article and there's literally nothing about Russia, like some Russian agent like approaching him. It's just like a bunch of sort of like rumor mill shit about like, well, some people said that, it seemed like Russian bot farms, and it's like there's also a huge difference between Russian bot farms, like generating memes that maybe even have a political bent to them, and the Russian government actually like interfering with elections. And that's like what Russiagate dipshits couldn't parse the difference of. But that's a whole other fucking rant that I guess is not really connected to OWS.
Wow, it's directly connected to what I was just saying, right? It's like, yeah, it is. It is connected to this.
I just mean I'm cutting myself off from going on an anti-Russiagate rant because that will get us further away from what we're really trying to talk about. And I've already, I don't know, it's just a separate subject. Like that's, the 2016 election. It's years after this. But there's a similar like gullibility here. But anyway, like you were saying, actually what he says in that article is, we know that Russians created fake Black Lives Matter protests and fake Standing Rock social media accounts. I don't know about that. Doesn't seem to be any evidence in this article.
Even if we know that, who cares? That's like such a nothing.
Yeah.
That's like, I mean, okay, they made accounts, whatever, who cares?
His whole point in the article is basically like, if you're doing activism, be wary of your movement getting like hijacked by, foreign outsiders. And like you said, you should also be wary of domestic meddlers as well. But for some reason, the focus here is just like, if it's foreign, it must be bad. Which seems, it's like
it's a skin in the game concept, right? It's the idea. It's like, oh well, yeah, of course, America is going to pay attention to what's happening inside its own borders because it directly affects us. But why would we care about why would the Russians be trying to influence and meddle with our personal stuff that's happening within our? And it's like, okay, but like that's also the exact same argument. Oh my God, Josh, I'm about to do your trademark. That's like the exact same, argument that people make about why do Americans care so much about what happens in Israel, in Gaza, and then they try to dismiss that, right? Where you say like, the reason why I give a shit about what's happening there is because our money directly impacts it. It's like kind of a similar thing. It's like, that is a skin in the game situation, but you're supposed to pretend as if it's not because it's technically a different country or whatever. It's like, come on.
Well, yeah, there was a recent thing with, why can't I think of his name? I subscribe to him on all kinds of shit. Owen
Benjamin?
Yes. Editor here. No, I was not thinking of Owen Benjamin. I was thinking of Owen Jones. Two very different people. Owen Jones being the more principled leftist, pro-Palestinian activist, journalist guy. Owen Benjamin being some sort of conspiracy nut, as far as I can tell. A quick Google search. So Tim either purposely or accidentally got me good there. Back to regularly scheduled programming. He was on some TV show, and some Israeli apologist piece of shit was like, he did that to him. Basically, it was like, why do you care? Like, I'm Israeli. That's why I care. Why do you care? And he's like, I care about children being bombed to death all over. I don't have to be like a countryman of them. And then, yeah,
exactly.
a whole thing where, and then, oh God, just showing how pathetic, like, these fucking people have nothing. Because Owen Benjamin went on to talk about how Germany should not be, sending weapons and funding to Israel, and that he said that they only really do it out of this guilt that they feel for the Holocaust. And this guy he was debating with or whatever was like, how dare you invoke the Holocaust? only we can play the Holocaust card. It's like, he's not invoking the Holocaust to like gain points. He's making a point about Germany's current day funding of Israel. But anyway, that was something that was like all over the Twitter level of news, like maybe last week or so. But
it's pretty good.
Moving on, but also sort of sticking with the Russia thing, I will say I'd never heard of RT until Occupy Wall Street, and I didn't even like I was just like, I like this RT thing, whatever it is. Like, I didn't even realize, it was state Russian media, but like every time I saw something with the little RT in the corner, like online, I was like, oh, they're telling the truth. Oh, they're showing like the real context of the police violence. Oh, they're having like interesting guests on, and they're letting them speak like in a free-formed, open-ended way, including Abby Martin, who ended up like even working for RT America after the fact. And I've seen a lot of interviews with her talking about her time there, and like,
yeah,
she basically, she still defends it as like a good like news outfit, and like her one big example of how, there didn't seem to be like a line to toe, was that she didn't surprise them. She like went to her boss or whatever and was like, I'm going to go on the air and talk about how it's a war crime and it's wrong that the Russian military is invading Crimea. They're like, all right. She did it. I mean, there was like criticism, but like, it wasn't like Putin was like, have her killed, or like she wasn't fired. Like, she kept her job. But anyway, that's just a little aside. More so that just like, I feel like I'm not the only one, probably at least of our general sort of like age range, that like discovered RT during the Occupy Wall Street times.
Right.
And the other point Abby Martin makes is like, even if RT is cynically covering Occupy because it makes America look like, troubled and like divided or whatever, so what? If they're doing real journalism and really covering what's happening, then that's good. Like, kind of their motives are secondary in that sense, I would say.
Yeah. I was trying to think, because you're talking about kind of the cultural adoption and cultural popularity of RT around that time. And as you said, seeing it and thinking, oh, at least like this is people who aren't going to be bullshitting me or at least bullshitting me in a different way. And I was trying to think about like if there was a similar particular thing that you could connect that to with like Al Jazeera, because I feel like it had a similar thing there, and also like, you know, very similar concept and as a partially at least government backed media organization. And I guess it would just be like the Arab Spring, right? Like, do you think like that was when like kind of the Al Jazeera thing kind of started paying attention to it?
Yeah, pretty sure. At least, yeah, because I mean, before that, I mean, even nowadays, like, good luck getting a certain style of person to take serious anything with a Muslim sounding name.
Yeah, for sure.
But
anyway,
you know, my only sort of time I ever, and I haven't like looked into this subsequently, but I feel like I remember Al Jazeera being on a list of like the dozens and dozens of like media outlets that Bill Gates essentially owns. But maybe that was once the case,
or maybe that's
I don't know.
Modern. That might be something that has happened more recently.
Well, I mean, this was a previous podcast episode, probably like 2 years ago, where I was basically going after Bill Gates' ass. Did I say Bill Gates before, or for some reason I feel like I said Bill Clinton by accident?
You said Bill Gates every time.
Okay. I always say Bill Gates. It's what I'm known for.
Yeah, you are a known Bill Gates sayer.
But anyway, getting unintentionally more digressive than I mean to be today, but maybe that's it's fine. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I guess like we don't really need to like go through like the timeline. I mean, I have it here just to like maybe help us through like remembering when certain events happened, but like.
No, I think it should be referenced if we need to double check something, but I don't think that's not the point of the podcast, is to go through the time.
We're not doing one of those I don't know, well produced NPR style. Let's go through the history of.
Yeah. No, we're doing more of a freeform style type. But yeah, okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say that, like you know, it was this thing was ignored for a while, but to go back to Adbusters, like they basically put out like they put out an ad or something, a poster, sort of famous poster now of like this ballerina on top of the big bull, the sacrilegious bull idol statue on Wall Street, and it said, "What is our one demand?" And then it was hashtag Occupy Wall Street, bring a tent. And so people, I mean, what distinguished this from like, you know, previous sort of like social movements, I guess, unless you go, I mean, I could think of like when the veterans like built that like shanty town basically in front of the White House. Also see previous podcast episode on that way back when. But that was in like 1932. But yeah, was the fact that people like made like a permanent, you know, like basically a camp at Zuccotti Park, which they renamed Liberty Park, I want to say. which I always thought was kind of funny because it just like Liberty Park just sounds like a Fox News guy's like idea of, a cool park. But I mean, I guess maybe they're trying to repurpose the word liberty, put new associations on it. And then, so this thing grew in size to like thousands of people staying there, and more like sort of prominent people like started endorsing it. And then like the big news outfits started doing coverage, but their coverage was like notoriously condescending and dismissive, as like, this is a bunch of fucking goofy ass morons who have no idea what they want. Which, to be fair, sure, there's some element of that, like, but overall, I would say there were some fairly clear demands, or, at least just like grievances being made. And they knew that, like, I mean, like, the creation of this 99 versus 1% thing was obviously in reference to like economics and like the consolidation of wealth by very few people, very few very powerful people. Just generally the connection between money and politics and how it's been like ratified into law. Like, you don't have to even do like under the table deals anymore with senators. You just legally bribe them, via, Citizens United, which people started to become more aware of. So like, yeah, I think there's a lot of, for as much as there is to like actually criticize even from the left of Occupy Wall Street, like, I think there's a fair amount of good stuff as part of its legacy, like just making people aware of these certain things that like now a lot of people just kind of readily know, just kind of like as if they always knew them. But like, I don't know, if I'm really honest with myself, I probably like learned a lot of stuff during this time that I didn't know much about, including like, well, I mean, I knew about like the corporate personhood concept and stuff before that, but anyway, I think like it was good consciousness raising, if nothing else, for some people.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess it kind of got people, it did open people's, it is weird to think about it now because there's just so much, everything is so available. I feel like but yes, it was like maybe a slightly more naive time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the past is always going to look a little more naive in certain ways, right? Like, I don't know. I still think
that's fair. Yeah, I guess just looking, like, you have to put yourself back in that headspace to really remember, like, that, yeah, I guess it was. But it's kind of even what we were talking about earlier with the Adbusters stuff. Just, it's of a different time,
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, like I referenced, like, how there can be, like, criticisms from, from the left. I tried to find a good kind of summary of that, and you can always count on the Trotskyists at the World Socialist website to be your cranks and to hate other leftists. And usually, honestly, I agree with like a lot of their analysis. Like, they are, maybe notoriously hostile towards the DSA. I think maybe with good reason. But I found some like of the time stuff they were writing about Occupy Wall Street, and trying to like really just summarize it here, but let's see. Okay, so like they basically kind of just sum it up, and then they say, however, the social and political outlook of those at the core of the protests, including anarchist organizations around the Canadian magazine Adbusters, which initiated the call to Occupy Wall Street, was fundamentally hostile to the working class. Contained in the 99% slogan itself was an effort to obscure the deep social divide between the working class and the more privileged sections of the upper middle class, for which these groups spoke. The slogans of, quote, no politics and, quote, no leadership were employed to prevent a political struggle against the Democratic Party. I think that's fair. It's like, it sounds like a little more sort of like conspiratorial than maybe it really was, but I think that's like just naturally how these things get co-opted or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No. It was just like a from the left critique, because I was gonna say like I don't disagree with that, but I heard a pretty decent like from the left critique. Now, mind you, maybe it's like unfair because you're like comparing this to something that's contemporary. The person that I heard this from was like kind of a Tumblr, far progressive lefty, like Native American Two Spirits kind of person was how they were like presented. And their critique, which I actually kind of appreciated in a weird way, was like, and maybe it'll lead to some more stuff we'll talk about later, which is that Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy movement in general, was trying to be such a big tent that it unfortunately ended up with accepting and including a lot of people that were not on the same page. And so as you talked about, like, the idea of there being like a critique from the left is pretty easy, because the whole point of like we're the 99% is that you include like libertarian freaks and cranks and Ron Paul acolyte fucking psychopaths into the 99%. And that was kind of the problem, is that they, you could say whatever, they like co-opted the movement and like turned it into about their thing, rather than the rest. But like, you can't argue with them because it wasn't really them doing that. They were just, that was part of the idea of the movement. When you say it's the 99%, that's literally everyone, right? That's just all the non-billionaires. And so that does include a ton of really shifty and shitty people. And I did kind of, like see that and understand it. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, I get that. So it does turn into like, okay, was it positive or negative? I honestly, in some ways, I appreciate like kind of the bigger picture and how it goes down the line thing. Did like kind of like to see that, like maybe there was a negative to it, but I think it was definitely well worth a shot. But I guess, yeah, the biggest like critique from the left I think you could make is that the idea that like it was so big tent, but that was in its nature what it was meant to be, that it literally included people that I think you would say were definitely not in any way part of the left. They just were not. But that was inherent to the movement. So yeah, like that was the kind of the critique that I would say.
Yeah, I can sort of shift myself into a headspace where I try to see something from another perspective of like, and I ultimately don't believe in this, but like, I mean, this is kind of the shit that like I think led to I don't know why this is my first example that goes to mind, but like a Jimmy Dore or like just someone nowadays whose like whole thing is like, well, we need to reach across the aisle, so to speak. We need to get conservatives with us, otherwise how can we get anything done type thinking. And of course, like, I mean, there's also just straight up grifting, of course, as well. But I think some people do genuinely believe that as like a pragmatic tactic or whatever. And I think that maybe that's where the, you know, the big tent sort of idea initially came from, is like, you know, we can see past our differences, brother, as long as we hate the bankers, you know. And like, I can see how that would like feel good in a like on a personal level, almost like feel good to like shake hands with someone that you like otherwise would never want anything to do with, but be like, oh, like we realize, like, you know, we have this sort of this thing in common that we can work together towards. But yeah, ultimately it doesn't fucking work. It doesn't work that way. Like, and there's, you know, there's some legitimacy for sure to the criticism that the you know, this horizontal structure, this leaderless structure kind of destroyed itself because nobody, like, I mean, I have like this stuff about, you know, because they did eventually a manifesto, or, you know, sort of list of grievances and demands was written down. But like, if you look through like the sort of history of how it got even made, and it was like committee after committee, General Assembly after General Assembly, you know, everybody's got an edit, everyone's got their 2 cents, like, and it just collapses. Like, it just, I can see the idealism in it and wanting it to work, but
well, I mean, we have like historically, like, there's just a ground, like you were saying there, like, I mean, again, it's like why there's like the concept of like the right wing authoritarian fascist state, whatever, like why it's that way. Like, when there's a power vacuum, those people who want, you know, daddy government to be in charge are the ones who are going to fill in. That's just their natural inclination. That's like water finding its level, right? So that's why, like, that's going to happen. Like, if there is any kind of like non-hierarchical structure, the right-wing element, the, you know, the, for lack of a better term, fascistic tendencies of an authoritarian side are going to like be the ones who try to fill that power vacuum. That's their nature, you know? So, of course, that's what's going to happen. And of course, if you're on the left, you're going to watch that and not appreciate it, but you're also going to be like, how do you really stand up to it? Because what you're trying to do is be like, hey, let's do nothing against the person who's doing something, right?
Yeah, I think there's also something to the idea that, like, it's too far to say that Democratic Party co-opted the Occupy movement, but I think they handled it in a very effective sort of PR kind of way. Because I was looking at, like, you know, I watched 2 documentaries about this last night, and there's some footage of like Obama getting interrupted by a mic check, which was very cringy to watch for multiple reasons. But like, you know, his tactic was just to be like, it's okay, let them make their point. Okay, now you made your point. Now I'm gonna talk to some folks and make my point. Okay, and then it's just boom, huge applause. Nothing was done. Obama just wins, you know. And then I think Biden also was like, you know, spoke sort of like said like a few like quote unquote sympathetic things. At least the headlines were all like, Biden sympathetic to Occupy, compares it to Tea Party, and it's like. I mean, I guess that's the other thing maybe worth mentioning if you're doing a historical retrospective of Occupy. In some ways, it was, I think you got to say, it was kind of inspired by the Tea Party movement, and people who were into Occupy often framed it that way, as like, we need to have, you know, our own version of that with the Democrats, basically like an infiltration, a reformist infiltration of the party, the way that the Tea Party, like, you know, got more sort of extreme right-wing ideas. At least that's the standard narrative. I mean, I would say that, like, the Republican Party has always been bad shit, but whatever. But maybe speaking of, okay, the documentaries I saw and the word reformist just reminded me of this. There's part of so one of the documentaries I watched was called American Autumn. Yeah. Unlike Arab Spring, get it? The very, very first, like, line you hear is from this old, like, 60s activist guy who I remembered actually reading one of, like, being required to read one of his books about activism when I was in college. This guy Todd Gitlin. And so anyway, he's like the cameraman, whoever the fuck is doing the documentary, asks him, like, is this a like a reformist movement or a revolutionary movement? And without skipping a beat, he's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it. You know, that's just words, and words can be tools or they can be our masters if we let them. And it's like, I was like yelled out loud, like, shut the fuck up. Because, like, it absolutely does matter what we call something. Like, especially if you're gonna sit there and pretend that you're, like, if you want to, like, do your fucking relive your glory days of, like, you know, we ended the war, man. No, you fucking didn't, by the way. Sorry, hippies. You didn't really end the war. The war fucking ended when it wanted to end. That's my hot take, anyway, on 60s protest culture. But he's like, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's reformist or revolutionary. That it hugely matters, because you're going to have different demands. You're going to have different goals. It's like, this guy's supposed to be the expert on like revolutionary activism. I don't know. It just really got under my skin. And then the documentarian himself, who I realized, like, throughout the course of watching that documentary, was a guy that I remember seeing on YouTube all the time back in the day. I guess probably around, like, little before and during this time, whose name I forget now. I think Dennis Traynor Jr. I think he's just like an actor. I looked him up just because I wanted to see if I could find, like, the old videos that I'd seen of him, and it appears that they don't exist anymore on YouTube. All his YouTube page has now is something advertising his one-man show, which is called, get ready for it, Manifest Destiny's Child.
Oh my fucking God. No. You're kidding me.
No, it's in theaters as we speak, it appears. But anyway,
as we speak, why? No. Why? No.
Well, he's the director of American Autumn, and yeah. Anyway,
I love this guy. I love this guy so much. He sounds like such a fucking sick grifter. Oh my God.
I have some memory, though, of him going to the, and here's another throwback to roughly the same time, slightly before Occupy. I have some memory of him going to the Rally to Restore Sanity, one of the cringeworthy things from, I don't know, the 2010s.
That was that, like, oh, if Stephen Colbert ran for president, I'd vote for him, right? That was that time?
Yeah, and it was like, it was literally like, it was so confused, like, it didn't even know what it was, like, because Jon Stewart, I started looking into that shit again, too. Again, another thing we could maybe do half of a whole episode on, but, like, he had like sincere speeches during that, but then like it was so like tonally confused. And I'm not saying you can't like do comedy and sincerity at the same time. You totally can, but like they just did it so poorly, so in such a confused way. It's like, is this just a spoof of? Because I think originally it was just like a satire or like a parody of Glenn Beck, another bygone era figure. Glenn Beck's like rally to restore whatever the fuck it was. But then it basically just turned into centrist jerk off fest. Was basically what the rally to restore sanity was. It was like incoherent centrist jack off festival. They were like, look, we've got Ozzy Osbourne and Cat Stevens on the stage playing Peace Train and Crazy Train simultaneously. Isn't that funny? And then the other detail I saw about that was Jon Stewart was like kind of had to not even really apologize, but he was just like, oh, I didn't know that Cat Stevens was like pro killing the Salman Rushdie.
Yeah.
He was like pro like the fatwa Salman Rushdie.
That's part of the whole deal, you know. When you're on that team, you just have to root for their fatwa. If they call a fatwa, you gotta be on board when you're on that team, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah, but it's also complete bullshit to kill a man for writing a book. So, yeah. Anyway, this documentary, American Autumn, this guy, Dennis Traynor. So on the topic of like people just kind of with this kind of mush mouth way of like talking where they like, we got like, the funny thing is about like with this, the whole Occupy sort of like scene to like, just to generalize it, like you hear this like very passionate tone of speech, but like there is a lot of times just and not all the time. Some people can speak very like eloquently with like facts and real clear ideas, but maybe more often than not, especially in things like documentaries, this guy basically does the same thing. He's like, call it whatever you want. Call it economic democracy or democratic economics, or he's like lists a bunch of words and he's like, call it pling plong ploom plom, doesn't matter what we call it. And all I'm thinking is like tearing my hair out, like it fucking matters, and call it what it is, fucking socialism.
Right.
The shit you want is called socialism.
No, it's called kling clong ploop plom.
and it just gets to the whole thing of like these people who are like, even though they're acting like they're such radicals, they can't even bring themselves to like say like. But then again, like this is like, I guess it really sort of shows the stark difference of this different time, because I bet that this fucking guy was a Bernie supporter and then was like more likely to use the S word more upfrontly. But you know, guys are guys like him. This fucking Manifest Destiny's Child motherfucker. Anyway, I will say the documentaries I watched two of them. So I watched that one, and before that I watched another one just called 99%.
Oh yeah. I did not watch that, but I saw it on the list.
I found a list of just documentaries about Occupy, but then like half of them are just not about. They're like before Occupy Wall Street even happened. So filmsforaction.org, get your shit together is what I'll say. Yeah, when you scroll down and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess they're documentaries of like related issues. Like there was like Neil Bohr's Capitalism, a Love Story, and some other shit. They put Zeitgeist on there. That's kind of funny. But also, you know, the Zeitgeist people were also totally at Occupy. Like 9/11 truthers were like a big part of, not a big part, but you know.
Yes.
I mean, that's
okay. Well, that was a thing that came up as we were talking, and I looked at it because I was like, you know, I was just looking some stuff over, and like Abby Martin was a big 9/11 truther. That was like the first thing that came up on her like career as a you know, journalist or whatever. One of the first notable things about her on her on Wikipedia. So yeah, there were definitely 9/11 trutherism involved in the, you know, in the Occupy Wall Street movement.
She definitely must have pivoted away from that, because I always have thought of her as the Israel-Palestine focused person.
Sure.
I mean, I guess she focuses on environmental stuff a lot too. I don't know.
I guess it's
like
unfair to. I do too. I'm not saying anything negative about her.
No, I just want to get that out there. That's all.
Sure. Yeah. But you know, I mean, there is also, it is like slightly unfair to say, like, you know, to paint someone as a 9/11 truther, especially when you're talking about the context of stuff that's like in the early 2000s to the 2010s, versus like now where it's kind of solidified into more of a, you know, a crazier thing, because it is like 9/11 trutherism like used to more run the gambit of like people who like question, you know, the JFK assassination versus like people who, you know, believe that the earth is flat, right? Like, you know, it used to be like kind of go from both ends of that, especially when it came to like there are people who just like are basically say like, clearly there's something much different than what they told us. What happened on 9/11. Even if you believe that like everything else involved is about true, but just like there's some maneuvering behind the scenes versus like inside job, you know, jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams or whatever like that. There's, you know, but that's kind of now, if you're still committed to it, you're a, you know, true believer, and you've probably like solidified into like something insane where you're like one of these people who says like the Twin Towers never existed. They were always a hologram that was just like the whole thing was fake, you know.
I just realized what I'm about to say almost is like parallel to like someone saying, why do you care what happens in X country if you're not from there? But it's not exactly. But I was more gonna say I would really understand if someone was like, you know, still waving signs and like making petitions about 9/11 investigations if they lost someone.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
But
that
like,
doesn't really work that way. But I get you.
But
I get
like,
what you're saying.
but like a person like me, like, I mean, I'm pretty sure some fucking weird shit went down that day. But I don't. It doesn't like animate my life. Is my point. Like, but neither does like the JFK stuff, which I 100% believe.
Sure.
In certain conspiracy theories about that as well.
Right.
But anyway,
now, do you believe that JFK was part of the 1% of Coxman, and the rest of us 99% will never be able to have as many sweet pieces of ass as JFK because he was hoarding it all for himself? That was just meant to get us back on track. Don't take it seriously.
Well, okay. I mean, I wasn't really taking. I was more gonna say I feel like his handsomeness is extremely overstated, and I've said this. I'm on record as saying this before. He's kind of a weird looking guy when you think about it. Just stare for a second.
Yeah.
Kind of weird.
He's the kind of guy. I mean, he is the kind of guy that makes. I'm the type of guy who fucks my mom and dad. No, he's the kind of guy that does make, you know, the average dude like feel like, you know, you could do something. You could definitely make something work. If that guy could do it, anyone could.
But
right?
he gets talked about by certain people, and maybe it's just people like of his generation who were like at the time like horny for him, but like, oh my God, he's just like breathtakingly handsome Adonis. Right. It's like,
right, but that's
like,
the point.
He's like a malformed Irish potato head, like just whatever.
Right, again, that's the point though. If you're able to look at it as someone who is like, I can't think of the objectively look at it and be like, he's that shit's all untrue. Again, it just goes back to being like, there is a way for someone to look like me or you and be swaggy enough to pull it off to where people literally believe it. They literally are able to trick themselves into believing these things.
Yeah.
Just because of how swagged out he is. You know, part of it also is like his dad was a fucking, you know, a robber baron, part of like making money off of bootlegging and shit, you know, like he was a Nepo baby. And no, not a lot of people talk about how JFK was a Nepo baby, you know? Anyways, moving upwards and onwards.
If anyone denies the handsomeness of my son, I'm going to send in some some bad guys with billy clubs. Turn your opinion around. Yeah, where were we? I mean, just like maybe like the broad arc of this whole thing. Like, I mean, I was trying to even like remember like when could we say it even really ended? So it kind of ended after what, like the second why can't I think of the word? Eviction? They like Bloomberg sent in like, you know, the world's 7th largest army, the New York Police Department.
The 7 Nation Army, that's what the song's about.
Yes. To forcibly remove everybody. I can't even really remember. I mean, I feel like there were multiple like big evictions, as they were called, but then like the final one, it looks like happened in January 2012. Looks like right as I was arriving in Korea in March 2012, they tried to reoccupy Zuccotti Park to mark the movement's 6-month anniversary. Man, it's weird. This whole thing basically lasted 6 months.
It felt like it was so long.
It felt so long, yeah. It felt really,
like it was forever.
It felt like it was like 2 years or something. And I mean, okay, like on the 1-year anniversary, thousands of people demonstrated again, but you know, it was just like a regular protest and tons of people got arrested. Also, like we should mention like how this thing spread throughout the country. I mean, as you mentioned, there was like Occupy LA, but then it was in like, I don't know how many exactly, but like 100 plus like major cities. And then, you know, I remember some of the funny things were like people in like small ass suburban towns like occupying their street corner. Like,
sure,
whatever.
But you know, it's funny to see, but it's, you know, it's not funny at the time or to look. They were trying to do something, you know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying. It is inherently funny to look at, but you know, the sentiment is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, I was listening to something. I heard people talking about thousands of like Facebook groups for different places. Like it was very ubiquitous all around. It was not like it was not small. It was very big.
And then everywhere. I mean, it went, you know, expanded like globally to some degree as well.
Which is interesting because I heard someone, I don't know if you saw anything about this, but I heard someone kind of talking about it as like being already, when it came to here, an Occupy Wall Street movement was kind of an import of something from England that was called like, what was it? The Square. God damn it. The movement on the square. Did you hear about that? Or did you see anything that on your lookup?
No. In England?
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, someone was talking about it. It happened in England, and it was called like the movement on the square, something along those lines. Yeah, movement of the squares, and it was like a very similar occupying public spaces movement that was happening in England prior to Occupy Wall Street, that they said was like part of like the influence, part of something that influenced and led to Occupy Wall Street. So it is interesting the way that it like then broke containment in America and spread around the world after it kind of was imported to us to begin with.
Movement of the Squares is not the best branding, though, I gotta say. It's like nerds for protest. Anyway, I'm sure it has some other meaning. You know, but the one of the like the far-reaching global occupations protests was in Nigeria. So there was like an occupied Nigeria, like took like, you know, the entire country. And I believe their protests were like sort of on a technical level, like way more effective than anything that was being done in the US, I think. I think they basically like had like a general strike for like a full week, just like shut down the country. Although, I mean, I guess to be fair, the size of Nigeria, size of the US, quite different population-wise, geographically, but anyway, and then of course, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, talking about inspirations, like, I mean, I think all the like Adbuster, Occupy, you know, originators said that the Arab Spring, and also like the really wild sort of uncoordinated, just like spontaneous violent protests in Greece when Greece was just like completely in the shitter. I do remember seeing people in Greece lighting a bank on fire and getting charged up about it back in these days.
That rocks. Yeah.
But that's the other thing though, is like I then, you know, again, like seeing people from like kind of analyzing even at the time or like in retrospect, but like maybe from the left going as far to say that like Occupy and the entire like Arab Spring movement were all just sort of like distractions from doing real class politics. And that ultimately they all didn't really result in much change, you know, because a lot of it is just like gradualist reformist stuff. But I don't know, it's kind of like the gradualist reformist shit is more than I'm doing. So I like it, even if it's ultimately ineffective, like I don't want to completely just be like, oh, this is like bullshit, this is just playing into the hands of the people you're claiming to protest against or whatever. But I think there is also a little bit of truth to that sometimes, unfortunately. I do kind of think there's something to the point too that the World Socialist website thing said about 99% like trying to like sort of blur the distinctions between the working class and then, you know, the sort of idle upper middle class or, you know, upper classes that are still, because I mean the people in the 98% are still quite well off.
Sure. Well, I mean, what you mean is the people who are in the 2% or the people who are in the 3%. Yeah.
Right. That's
yeah,
what I mean. Yes.
Yeah.
98th percentile.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like me. Like, I always have this thing. Like, obviously, I live in LA, and I even heard someone mention this recently because we were talking about... It was actually that Jesse Waters clip that I sent you, I think. Or maybe I posted it in the Discord. People should join the Discord. I got the Poppin' Discord over at Violent People. We need to get our Discord popping. But the Jesse Waters clip where he was talking about, like, how much money do you make if you make $20 an hour working for Walmart, and he keeps... You know, but I heard someone, like, referencing that and talking about it, and they were like, talking about how if you make $100,000, you're in, like, the top, 10% of, or even it's probably even higher than that. It's insane how high you are. But, like, living in LA and making that much money, I still feel poor. You know what I mean? So it's just like, yeah, like, when you talk about that 99% thing, it is like, God, you could probably go down to like 5%. You could be like, you're in the 5%, and you're like, you're still part of the 99%. It truly is the 1% that's like, the only people who actually feel rich, and the rest of us are like, fuck, no matter what, even if you do make $100,000.
But it's relative. I mean, there's not feeling rich, and then there's like living in your car or being homeless. You can't like lump everyone together in that way. And then I'm not even saying that that's what they mean to do with the slogan. Sure. Like, I don't think it's intentional. I think they would recognize, yes, there are distinctions, but I think the idea of like, I don't know, the upper middle class, like recent college graduate, who has a lot of debt. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what my point is, other than there are differences, and if like it can be maybe dangerous to paper them over and just be like, no, we're all in this struggle together. It's like, well, kind of, but also not really. Like,
yes and no. I mean, when you do not have like a cushion, you don't have institutional wealth, and you truly, even if you are making, a good amount of money, but you are still in some ways living paycheck to paycheck or whatever, even if you would say that you have, like some kind of, you have like, in theory, a safety net that could catch you, but you don't necessarily have any like next step after that. You are like just on the brink of that. You know what I mean? So it is easy to separate it or whatever, to think that you can separate it, but you can't necessarily,
Yeah.
It's a difference in nature and not in kind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. To circle back, to call back, at least in April of 2021, which is, I think, when I talked about this on the podcast, roughly, Bill Gates doesn't own Al Jazeera. He what it is that he's given huge amounts of money to tons of media outlets, including Al Jazeera being one of them.
Sure. Which, I mean, that Abby Martin interview that you kind of referenced earlier or talked about, like, it does kind of it does shed a little bit light on that idea that I think a lot of people like us and a lot of people in this media sphere like to like shit on people like that and be like, oh, if you were, if Bill Gates gave a bunch of money to them, then they'll never say anything bad about him, right? Like the idea that Abby Martin was like willing to, and again, not everybody is Abby Martin, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that she was willing and able to go on there and decry like Russia invasion of Crimea, it does speak to the idea that like it is not, as much as you want to say it's like soft power and Bill Gates donating all this money means they'll never say anything bad about him. It doesn't mean 100% that they won't. And it is why that like, even if I think that John Oliver is like powerfully and painfully Reddit at this point, like he still does call out like the companies that own, his show and all this, like pretty directly. and is unapologetically pretty fucked up, you know, in some of the stuff that he says. So it does go like, okay, there is like some media that you can't, like, it doesn't matter, you know, like that idea that like, oh, Bill Gates, like, you know, donates money to them, a lot of money, then that means he's in control. Like, you know, not every billionaire that donates money to something is like Rupert Murdoch or Peter Thiel. Like, they don't necessarily, just because they donate money does not necessarily mean that they like have a say in the editorial process.
No, it doesn't mean that. But I also don't think that he's doing it out of the goodness of his heart because he believes in Al Jazeera. Because, and I'm fine. I just found the article that I think I was basing a lot of this on, which was from November 2021. But it's from the gray zone, crazy gray zone, so you can't trust it. But it's a pretty thorough look at Bill Gates, like, and the millions and millions of dollars he's given, like, I mean, I'm looking at the list of media companies, and it's fucking very long. And they are media companies of all sorts. Like, there's no like pattern of like, oh, he's a real lib. Like, it's like to everybody, including Al Jazeera, you know. And it looks like NPR got the most. And but you know, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I also think that Bill Gates is not a force for good, let's say. But that's, again, another total fucking tangent if we go off too much in that.
Yeah, probably not at this point.
Although I do find it disturbing that he owns, like, I forget exactly how much, but like, no one owns more farmland of the United States than Bill Gates. He owns like an absurd amount of just land.
Yes. Yeah. Not just the United States.
A lot. That's
the other part. That's the troubling part.
Yeah, he's really big into like trying to like get those
Brazil
suicide seeds from Monsanto going in India. But yeah.
Okay. So I don't know how much more you want to do or how much.
Well, I mean, I did lay out here like sort of like different perspectives on Occupy, which I kind of already covered, like the sort of critical left perspective. And you can obviously imagine the right-wing perspective was very critical and just in a very dumb way. I want to give a couple of fun examples because I think they're so funny. They're so stupid. This is from Fox News. And this was like a retrospective, I think, around the 10-year anniversary of Occupy, entitled "Occupy Wall Street is Still Hurting America." Quote, "A short, incomplete list of how Occupy changed the political dynamics of America must include three things. Income inequality is the main driving issue for progressives." Okay. I guess that's sort of fair enough. The defunding or diminution of policing and race essentialism. Before the Occupy movement, each of these were fringe positions in the Democratic Party. Today, by and large, they are the Democratic Party. Would you agree with that? Do you agree the Democratic Party's main focus is income inequality?
Yeah, definitely. That seems to be
defunding the police.
No, I mean, I think that the Democratic Party's main focus when it comes to income inequality is the amount of incoming bombs to the Gaza Strip and the inequality of people that are being allowed to live there. Yeah.
And race essentialism, that's the funniest one. And I guess by that they just mean what? DEI? Or like...
I guess. I mean, I always think of race essentialism as like the opposite. Right, yeah. I think of like race essentialism as kind of being the opposite of what people think of that DEI.
Well, that,
means.
but I mean, that as I was saying, like from a dumb Fox News perspective, they think they're doing a fun rhetorical trick there. It's like, no, liberals are the real racists. People that say Black Lives Matter are the racists.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yes, I agree. I think with what you're saying. I'm pretty sure.
But yeah, and then like towards the end of the article, he kind of reiterates, but also sort of changes the subject a little bit and says, Occupy Wall Street was based on the idea that capitalism, policing, even America itself, we're irrevocably broken. It was an extreme fringe position. Today, just 10 years later, it no longer is. It is rather the core philosophy of the Democratic Party. Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think what we've been saying is that, like, you know, maybe more sort of just normal people, like just people, but not necessarily Democrats or people that shill for and, you know, vote blue no matter who, are more sort of aware of like certain lingo and, you know, certain concepts like, you know, Citizens United and corporate personhood and things like that, but
or my computer froze. But
even that, I mean, even that shit is like completely.
I think it's you. Goddamn.
Like muted. Like nobody talks about any of this stuff in Democratic Party discourse. You kidding me? But it's just one of those things. Like whenever I read about like, you know, how Biden is, you know, the far left's dream and shit like that. Like it just cracks me up because it's so wrong. How about, I forget what I was saying. Doesn't matter. I think whatever I was saying was probably coming to an end. But I know you wanted to talk about Tim Pool, aka Dim Tool. Want to. Because he was, you know, he made his bones at the Occupy, right? I've only just recently learned this.
I've known it for a long time, but you know,
I
really think
also
about
don't
it and
follow
break it down.
Timcast. I mean, I'm not in the Tim club, so maybe that's why.
The Tim universe, yeah. The thing about it too is like I hadn't even thought about this until I heard about it or whatever. Like one of the main reasons why Tim Pool even was a name coming out of Occupy Wall Street was like I heard someone describing it as like it was a game of who could last the longest when it came to streaming at the time. It's very funny to think about it now because it's very different. And the reason why Tim Pool was able to continue streaming is that from the beginning he started out, he was streaming on Ustream, which that was like kind of the blast from the past thing that got me, right? And Ustream never censored or pulled him down, which is very interesting to think about. And that was why, that's like the main reason, like he was one of the bigger streaming channels at Occupy LA that continued on the longest. And so it basically got to a point where people just kept paying attention to him because he was like, you know, oh, he's been the longest standing or whatever. I'm continuing to stream. And it was primarily because he started on Ustream. And then I was just kind of thinking about like the history of streaming services and like Justin TV and how that turned into Twitch and then blah, 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 whatever. But it's very interesting to think about all of that. I don't know. Do you care to talk any more about Tim Pool? I don't really care that much about him. I find him very funny. He's a funny guy to gawk at and laugh at, but I do not find him particularly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of that's possibly interesting about him is seeing how he's is what, you know, a fair amount of people have done to like create a grift career, which is completely flipped their politics. So he, you know, the little bit I started reading about him to like just today. So I just don't know him very well. I read a story about mean, this has nothing to do with our topic today, but whatever. I thought it was kind of funny that he had 3 people storm out of his podcast studio all at the same time. Kanye West, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Nick Fuentes. They were all in the same show together.
Right. Well, they were together. No, they're together because that was a unit. They were there together as a unit.
Well, but
that was not random.
I didn't say it was random. I'm just saying
okay.
I'm saying almost the opposite of that. They left out in lockstep because Kanye got mad because he was being slightly challenged, isn't even the right word. Like what I read about it was like, he was like, yeah, but it's really the Jews, right? And Tim basically just said, well, is it? He just asked the question, like, are you sure? And he's like, this is a setup, man. And he like stormed out. And then the way I like to picture it, since I didn't watch video of this, is that like Milo and Fuentes kind of like eyes darted back and forth. And then like, no, we got to follow our boss. And they just like got up and left with him. But.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought that you were implying like he just randomly had them all together on the show.
No,
because of the way that
I'm saying it's a funny. I mean, it's still like it's a fucking funny group of morons to be all together on one show. I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. No, I get what unites them there. Like just
the fact that Kanye West is a millionaire and the rest of them are, just following his coattails.
Yeah, that's it. Nothing to do with views about
that's what
the elders of Zion or anything. But
no.
Like speaking of Yiannopoulos, Milo, like I forgot he existed, and I think I sent you something a couple of weeks ago, maybe now, but like, yeah, when we were deep in the manosphere, I accidentally landed on some stuff with him, and like I just forgot he existed, and like he just seems like so pathetic now. He like looks like shit, even like more than before. But yeah, his whole thing now is like being repentantly gay, which he claims he always was, and maybe he always was. I mean, I never paid that much attention to him to begin with, but I thought his whole thing was, I'm an alt-right piece of shit, but I'm also gay. So like, haha, gotcha. Somehow. It's like, no, we can criticize gay people. Just because we're on the side that doesn't outright want to burn them alive doesn't mean we can't criticize them, you fucking moron.
Yeah, right.
And especially when they start like giving out pro pedophilia messaging on the Joe Rogan podcast or whatever.
I think you're not allowed to do that on there just because of the Spotify deal.
Well, that was probably pre that, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think Joe would have been fine with you saying pro pedophilia stuff on there before Spotify, but that's what happens.
So what I'm guessing this rational wiki is probably like sort of a new atheist adjacent Wikipedia. That's all I can imagine it is.
Yes,
right?
It is. Okay. That is what it is. Yes.
So the rational wiki of Tim Pool says Tim Pool's a far-right conspiracy theorist, grifter, and YouTube commenter and former Vice News reporter who reads other people's tweets and news articles out loud for a living. I mean, it's funny to see it written that way, but then I thought, like, I was almost going to go, that's what I do. And I was like, but I don't do it for a living. I don't get paid. Anyway, just the whole reading other people's tweets and news articles out loud. Anyway, it's a kind of a funny, reductive way to talk about like a lot of what podcasting is. He describes himself as a, quote, social liberal and a, quote, left libertarian. Left libertarian always gets me. Funny stuff.
Yeah.
Or some libertarian socialists. Remember those? Who, quote, supported Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang, and Tulsi Gabbard. This is all in quotes. So apparently he really did say this. Despite this, his content is composed almost exclusively of rebuttal-free alt-right talking points. He's basically one of those centrists who somehow always agree with the American right on most of, if not all, issues. That makes sense. And as he first gained notoriety from being on the front lines of Occupy Wall Street protests. So that's Tim Pool. Tim Pool. Occupy gave Tim Pool a career in a roundabout way, I guess.
Okay, so here's the big picture thing that I wanted to talk about Occupy. And obviously, I'm not trying to force this to be the closing topic or anything, but
no, let's wrap it up. I'll have a final word, but go ahead.
Okay, so the big, it's more of it's like a conversation.
I mean,
I'm saying it doesn't have to be the final topic.
Last thought, whatever I have in mind as well. Yeah.
As we talked about earlier, as I mentioned, like the idea that Occupy Wall Street was the big tent movement that was supposed to attract everyone who was part of the 99%, which means, everyone who's not like a billionaire, and the positives and the negatives of that meant that a lot of those different groups of people got together and they formed different coalitions with each other that were like subsets and sub-brands of the Occupy movement, and even spun off into like further things down the line. An interesting note, as I talked about, I listened to like a more conspiratorial minded conversation about it, was like that the, Anon hacker movement had different sects as well inside of it, and it resounds back to like QAnon or to 4chan, which was like the progenitor of like the bigger movements, and that a subset of Anon hackers or whatever that was more left leaning, that was like called I don't even know, it was like called like Lulz Gate or something weird like that. A lot of them that were like left leaning got raided, busted, and arrested, while like the right-wing side of the Anon hacker groups kind of tended to, not have the same issues. I will say they did not tend to get arrested and spend time in prison. So it just like almost even feels like the government, the American government, was intentionally not prosecuting right-wing people as hard as they were prosecuting left-wing people, which sounds crazy, right? America would never support right-wing fascism more than they support left-wing extremism or whatever.
Glad no.
But like I said, the big picture thought is that the idea of getting all of those people under the same umbrella together and forming these factions kind of spun out into two unique, but clearly, coming from the same tree, branches off of the same beginning point in at Occupy that leaded down the line, as I talked about earlier, where Occupy affects all of us bigger than we like to even imagine, because kind of the way that it forks off, that the two sides, the two movements that came from it were like the MAGA Trump movement, which becomes, and then the Bernie movement.
Yeah, totally.
Both kind of started at Occupy.
Yeah.
And then we saw how they like splintered off and broke, and it does speak to like the differences between the political parties. People have talked about it a ton. It's been, communicated to death, but it's not necessarily really brought back to the idea that the powder keg moment, the spark that lit the fuse, was getting this big tent movement where all of these communities came together. So at the end of it, it is kind of like, okay, well, yes, all of these other butterfly flaps its wings, whatever moments, all this stuff that can happen. The reason why the right-wing party was more, conciliatory to being taken over from a grassroots movement the way that it was, as opposed to the left-wing party that was more entrenched and had, super delegates and all that stuff, that was able to keep out the, grassroots movement that built through. That part is not necessarily it. But when you look at it big picture and you think about that, those two movements were kind of spurred from, the kindling that started at Occupy. Did Occupy end up having a more negative impact on society when you really do think about it? Because what we get is two movements, one being Bernie, which is positive, and one being Trump, that you could say is negative. And the Trump one ends up winning out and is more powerful and looms, overhead large as a specter, is probably taking over again and continuing on for who knows how long, while the Bernie movement has just been completely subsumed. So it does end up, again, as we talked about earlier, with the power vacuum and trying to do a non-hierarchical thing with everyone involved, all it ended up doing was kind of like being a nice meeting place to create a really bad right-wing fascist movement, whereas like the left wing just kind of was fizzled out and was never really able to move forward from there. And it is kind of interesting to think about that when it comes to it, because it was, at its core, it seemed like it was meant to be kind of a more positive thing, but did it end up having a more negative impact?
I mean, I think it's just kind of like an outburst of, like social unrest, like a natural disaster or something. Like I think it was going to happen one way or another. So I don't know. I'm not trying to say like it was fated that there would be this exact version of it with Donald Trump becoming the president or whatever. But there. I mean, like we already said, because I mean, but you could go back then and blame the Tea Party. You could blame the Arab Spring because they led to Occupy, right? It's like, what's really the true beginning of it? But I mean, I see your point. I just don't know, like the blame. I don't know. There's plenty of blame to go around, I guess, is what I'll say. That is not just at like the feet of this movement that. We said it lasted 6 months. I'm looking at the timeline again. They first were evicted after only 2 months. And then there was another sort of big eviction in January, but that was like after they like were, trying to reoccupy. And it was a much smaller thing. It was like, a couple hundred people, it looks like. So this thing really was like 2 months long, like at least in the epicenter, New York. Like there were still things going on around the country. Like there was actually in one of the documentaries, I think the Autumn one or whatever, they talk about how in Oakland, like people were kind of like, Oakland has like this history of like sort of radical political activism. And there was a bunch of interviews with Boots Riley, who I really like to this day, film director, etc. Politics man, activist guy, cool guy. But they were like blocking like the ports and stuff in like up and down the West Coast. Actually, ultimately leading to what? Not much, but still, like it wasn't just camping and it wasn't just breaking windows. Like they were doing like real coordinated type shit. And I think Oakland is where they've done the same sort of port blocking recently to like block equipment and weapons from getting shipped to Israel. But anyway, that's just a sort of side detail on and within the whole the sprawling 2 to 6 month saga, depending on how you measure it, which did yet again feel like so much longer. But I was going to say when you mentioned the like Bernie movement kind of growing out of Occupy and also like the fizzling out of Occupy, I remember in the Occupy days, I probably still have it if I find my old Facebook image cache wherever, picture of like this old man just holding this like beat up piece of cardboard, and all it said on it, like in kind of not even huge letters, was Bernie Sanders for president. And this was like long before, anyone was talking that way. But it was something that I had said, to myself or whatever, or maybe online while, listening to Tom Hartman on the radio and listening to Bernie Sanders every week. Just a little memory there. I don't know, like as far as overall kind of closing thoughts, I had a thought. I was right before we started, I was just trying to like get any last little bit of, information into my head about this. And I just clicked on kind of a random YouTube video, which was Democracy Now's 10-year coverage. And they're interviewing this activist filmmaker, Astra Taylor. And she was just basically saying something like, she was there in New York when it all like started. And she said it was exciting, but like not for the reasons of like, oh, look how many people there are. It was more in the simple fact of like just meeting people and talking to people. And it kind of put me in a mindset of like how we can like look at we can look at the Occupy movement and maybe even like on the more micro level, like Zuccotti Park itself, like how it functioned as being like just an offline version of the internet. I know that sounds kind of silly because it's like, I guess life is just an offline version of the internet or whatever in general, but like, but more in a more specific sense. So like, it's fragmented and like messy, and there's like disagreements, just fucking people trolling, but there's also, like camaraderie and like, mutual support and having like cohesive ideas, etc., etc. But unlike just like some message board or whatever comment section, it's not as easy to like dismiss or like confine, silo off that kind of discussion when it's in real life. It's not just like hidden away subreddits within retweets, within fucking upvoted comments, within Insta stories, and then each one has a separate YouTube channel. You get it. The internet's confusing and has lots of spot spaces. But no, it was the meat space. People were touching grass, as they say. As they probably didn't say in 2011, I'm guessing, but I don't know how long that one's been around.
Touching grass meme has been around for a long time, but probably not as
15 years. Well, anyway, I'm the old man about this stuff, and you're the young buck who knows all the memes. In any case, point is people were like outside talking to each other, which like especially like which was, I don't know. I'm just saying, like from looking at it from a vantage point of 2024, and I guess in light of living through pandemic, just that feels like sort of profound in itself. Like just the idea of spontaneously meeting like significant numbers of strangers and like face to face and talking, like let alone politically organizing, and let alone like doing it coherently or effectively. So I don't know. Maybe that's this sort of silver lining type thing I'm trying to walk away from all of this shit with, because I don't know. It's too easy to be cynical about like the rest of it. But so I don't know. Maybe that's the best thing. This weird little 2 to 6 month period in history can be looked at as like being aspirational. Get outside.
Yeah.
Air your grievances, make new friends, form labor unions,
or form the Tea Party. I guess the Tea Party was before. Form the do meme magic, make some keks.
I'm saying get off the internet, go outside.
Yeah, but that's how it started. It started outside and then it grew into the internet is undefeated, brother. You're not going to stop it.
I'm not saying stop the internet. I'm saying like what I'm really saying is basically what a lot of other people have said, like your Richard Wolff types, like socialism is going to start like at the micro level, the smallest levels, like in the workplace, right. and in terms of like just organizing labor unions essentially. And I don't know, maybe doing that in a park with some signs isn't the worst idea either. I don't know, because also that, I mean, just saying like, it's so easy to ignore things that happen online. It's and let alone like, I mean, ignore and just like never see just accidentally. So that's just all I was thinking when I was watching these documentaries that had all this footage of like thousands and thousands of people physically out of doors together. And yeah, they had cell phones and computers and were using them, but like it wasn't just a sea of people staring at their phones either, or taking selfies and whatever. But anyway, it feels really funny to be like old man romanticizing 2011 now as like this time when we were less online. But I don't know. It's just the last thing that popped into my head right before we started recording. So I don't know. I think that's probably my last thought for the day, at least on Occupy.
Sure.
And we didn't even I mean, you kind of mentioned in passing a little bit like Anonymous and the role they did play like a major role in organizing this, like from the very beginning. Like it's arguable that Anonymous and Adbusters were the two main like forces that got people to bring their tents out, whatever. But there's this new documentary about Anonymous that I'm going to check out, and it could possibly be an episode. We'll see. But I guess now we recommend some stuff, and I've recommended the OJ things, but there's another thing I wanted to toss in. There's a movie called Bones and All, starring one Timothée Chalamet. I think it's by the same director who did, what is it? Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah.
Same director, I believe. Yes. And it's him and this one actress who I think needs to be in more movies, named Taylor Russell. She's really good. And it's based on a book, and it's about cannibals. But like not in the zombie sense, and not in the like we're choosing to be cannibals sense, and not in the like horror movie scary, like I mean there's some like horrific style elements to it, but it's I mean it's listed here as a romantic horror film. I guess that's fair enough. I mean, to me it just seems like a drama with slight like moments of like goriness, but it doesn't come across as like a scary movie to me at all, really. But it's really good. I don't know, it like, I mean obviously there's a lot of like allegorical shit going on. Like the point isn't it fucked up if people like ate other people? It's I mean, which it is, and it's portrayed as being fucked up, but I don't know, it's portrayed in a way like I've never seen in any other like media before, and the acting is great, and really like the kind of center of it all is this like young love affair that develops between these like, I don't know, young kids basically. And it's a bit of a period piece set in the 80s, the 1980s, and they're the main two, but like all the side players are also really good actors as well. So yeah, check that out. I think it didn't, considering that Call Me by Your Name was so huge, and I still haven't seen it for some reason. I don't know why. I should watch it. I think no, I have no reason.
Know why you haven't seen it.
I don't
know why you haven't seen it. Because you're a homophobe.
Right.
I hate gay people. Yeah, I get it.
I'm a peachophobe. I was gonna say maybe it's because of the Army Hammer revelations, but I think I knew about the movie before those came out, so I don't know. Maybe I am a homophobe.
Okay, you're allowed.
No, I mean, here we go. Here's a little teaser for Bones and All. If you want to see Timothée Chalamet seduce a carnival worker, a male carnival worker, and then begin eating him alive right before the guy's about to come, this movie's for you. And as his girlfriend looks on, not turned on, not angry, just kind of neutral, just kind of like, oh, I gotta eat as well.
Yeah.
Then this movie's for you. So yeah.
Perfect.
See there, okay. I'm not a homophobe. I loved that scene where he's jerking the guy off and then he kills him.
Watching the guy, there is. I mean, anyways, we'll continue on. I'm not gonna break down, your sexual predilections. My first recommendation is Touching Grass. We talked about it earlier, but the meme that you were saying maybe it didn't start. The first tweet that they could find where someone mentions Touching Grass was in 2015. So it does draw back. And they were referencing something else. So the concept of touching grass existed prior to, I don't remember.
I was talking about Occupy, which is 2011.
Yeah, but it it didn't end Occupy was continuing on into 2015-ish range, and like I
No.
said, they were referencing something before that, so it's been around for longer than Occupy existed, or at least whatever.
No,
Another
hasn't.
thing it did. It was proven. I just proved it right now.
2011. It has to be before 2011 to prove your point.
Yeah, it's 2015, and they were saying it happened. Someone else was talking about it before, and 2011 was before 2015, so it's before.
All right.
The other thing I was going to reference is reference, or not a reference. I was going to recommend was something that was referenced earlier when you mentioned Dr. Richard Wolff. Because I was listening to his coverage of Occupy Wall Street recently, and what he recommended was thinking about Occupy Wall Street in the context of the Great Depression, which of course he would. And the thing that he recommended, if you wanted to understand the times of the Great Depression, was The Catcher in the Rye. So I would recommend The Catcher in the Rye, one of the greatest books of all time. American novels, I guess I should say. So yeah, if you want to understand and kind of comprehend the vibe of the Great Depression, which in a lot of ways was reminiscent to what was happening during Occupy, even though the Great Depression was much obviously bigger and more deeply felt than what was happening, but is continuing to happen. It's just really, automated capitalism being able to figure out the ways to sand off the edges and make it feel a little bit more normal, just how badly we're getting fucked, compared to back in the past where they just really were trying to just, rip it from you and just act like you just have to deal with it. Yeah, that would be, those are my recommendations.
I would have never connected Catcher in the Rye with the Great Depression, though. I'm just saying. Those are like generationally different.
It's kind of the milieu. Is it gives you kind of like a similar, I guess, feeling. Was kind of the vibe or whatever that he, I guess, recommended. I don't 100% understand it either.
Wait, did Richard Wolff recommended Catcher in the Rye? Is that what you...
Yes. Yeah.
Huh.
He recommended The Catcher in the Rye as a way to... Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I think that doesn't make any sense, man. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to... I mean...
No. I absolutely...
You're thinking of Cannery Row?
No. Great Gatsby.
I mean, that makes more sense, because Catcher in the Rye is like after post World War II, and it's about like basically a rich kid.
Yeah. Wait, that might be correct. No.
I mean, either way, you can recommend Catcher in the Rye as a novel you like. I mean, I'm not saying don't. I was curious. I had to think about it, because it just, when I think like books about like the Great Depression, I'm thinking like Steinbeck, Dust Bowl type shit.
Sure.
Not like prep school kid in New York City in the 50s.
Right, but I do, but again, I guess that's true. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no. He was saying The Great Gatsby. That was that's on me.
I mean, that's an interesting way of looking at it too, though, because that book is, again, like the focus is on the idle rich. So I guess from like that perspective,
the idea
you can see what leads up to the Great Depression, because that's like pre-Depression era jazz age shit.
Right, which was the point, was that it was, the idea is seeing what led to the Great Depression was these are again, like you said, the idle rich, the people who are like, how do you put it? They're exploiting the underclass to the point where they're feeling like a malaise, while there's like a tension bubbling underneath that leads to the explosion or whatever. That was the idea. Either way.
So do I have you down for Great Gatsby and Catcher in the Rye?
Probably just The Great Gatsby, but you can, yeah.
I mean, I wanted to make a crack about, sure, feel like recommending a book written by a canceled problematic pedophile.
Might as well.
Pedophile is maybe a bit strong word. I forget what there were some things found out about Salinger after the fact.
I'm sure he was a pedophile. Anyways, that's what I get. That is what I get for trying to remember the teachings of Dr. Wolf from 10 years ago.
Also, what this the real lesson here is a lesson that you've been teaching the podcast, which is we don't read books, we don't talk about books, we don't recommend books. You go out and try and start promoting pedophiles and but also cool guys like Richard Wolff, the good doctor. All right, well, let's occupy Wall Street. Sort of.
Yeah, we got there.
Remember that little girl statue in front of the bull? That was exciting. People were like, "Yeah, take that, take that, Wall Street." Okay, I'm not gonna. I'm just It's time to end it. Yeah. End it here. Yes. As we in the 1% always say, fetch my slave torturing toolkit, my racist sex doll brigade, and gas up and ready the jet for Big St. James Island, baby.
I write to give word the war is over, send my cinders home to mother. They gave me a medal for my valor, leaden trumpets spit the soot of power. They say I'm on your side when nobody is, 'cause nobody is. Come sit right here and sleep while I slip poison in your ear. We are waiting on a telegram to give us news of the fall. I am sorry to report, dear Paris is burning after all. We have taken to the streets in open rejoice, revolting. We are dancing a black waltz, fair Paris is burning after all. Oh no. Enclosed in this letter there's a picture, black and white for your refrigerator. Sticks and stones have made me smarter. It's words that cut me under my armor. They say I'm on your side when nobody is, 'cause nobody is. Come sit right here and sleep while I slip poison in your ear. We are waiting on a telegram to give us news
The first voice recording was made in 1860. It was a 10-second fragment of the French folk song Au clair de la lune recorded by inventor Edward Leon Scott de Martinville. But who will make the final voice recording and when? What will it be? Who will hear it?